Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and these are my top 10 games to start a board game collection. Now, there's a bunch of things to get into before we dive into this list, a bunch of caveats, things to note. First of all, there are 10 games on this list. Those 10 games, if you went to Miniature Market, no, not sponsored, just Miniature Market had all the games. Well, sort of, they had listings for all the games, some of them were out of stock. But if you went to Miniature Market, these 10 games would cost you $363.99. And you could, I guess, sign up for that 10% off your first order. If it is your first order, you are starting a board game collection after all. But $363.93, not a cheap amount of money, not by any means, but also not the craziest for 10 fantastic board games that are a great opportunity or a great way to get into the board game hobby. If you do want cheaper options, there's a video, I'll try to link them down below if I remember, but there's a video I did of, you know, the best way to spend $100 on a new collection. You don't get 10 games out of it. I think you got like 5 or 6, something like that. There's also a video of 10 incredibly cheap games. If you want 10 games that are under $15 each, I have that as well. If you want great gateway games, I've done that too. There are a bunch of adjacent videos that I've done around this topic, but this specifically is around 10 great games to start a collection with, and the mindset as I go through these was picking games that are, for the most part, fairly accessible as far as the rules, strategy, accessibility, all that. I have one game that is arguably a bit heavier than I would want on this list, but I'm including it, and I'll explain why as I get up to it. As I go through these games, I'm going to be doing it from what I think is the most accessible to the least accessible. But so these mostly trend towards gateway games, but they do ramp up a bit as you go. They also include a large variety of mechanics. I made sure I had things that were solo-friendly, cooperative. I made sure I had some roll and write, some games that play in 15 minutes, and some games that play in an hour and a half, covering a variety of mechanics from deck building to cooperative play to worker placement to I don't know what else there is. There's a bunch of different mechanics and genres included in this list of games. That's kind of the criteria. These are not necessarily the best possible 10 games ever. There are a million fantastic games out there. Well, there's a lot of games out there. There's not a million fantastic. There's a lot of fantastic games out there that could be chosen to start your board game collection with. I'm sure I'll do videos like this in the future. But for right now, this is the start. Well, this is the list I currently have as of today, 2023. Anyways, let's go ahead and start off. Starting off with the first one, which I think is a great game for you to enjoy, but also one of the most accessible games on this list and a good way to get those around you into gaming as well. That's going to be Canvas. Canvas is one of those games that has become one of my go-to gateway games. It's an easy game to introduce people to. It's a game that people will play the way they want to play it, either just creating pretty pictures or alternatively actually engaging in the fairly strategic gameplay that this offers. I will note as I go through these that many of these games I do have expansions for, but I do not think you need expansions to enjoy them. Anything on this list is something that I recommend even without the expansion included to keep your price down to that very, very reasonable $363.93 before your 10% off coupon. Genuinely not an ad from Miniature Market. Anyways, well, I guess it is, but just not sponsored. Anyways, Canvas over here is going to be a game which you're gathering cards, and the goal is to create 3 works of art across the course of the game. As you gather these acrylic cards that are see-through cards you can see through, you're going to be creating overlays, but also creating scoring objectives or scoring criteria that will fulfill a variety of scoring objectives that change game to game. So you're trying to be mindful of both the strategic aspect and also how nice and pretty the things look when laid over each other. In the game, you're going to have these as the cards. You can see over here you have different little pieces of artwork, a background, and then 3 pieces of art all combined to form your work of art. So that's going to be the center of your work of art, which is not how you actually score points, at least not until you get to expansions where there's a way to score points, but not how you actually score points. Rather, you're scoring points from these down here. Those cards also have various bottom parts. They go down here, and those will fulfill a variety of scoring criteria that want different symbols or combinations of symbols or symbols next to each other or all the colors of the rainbow, the 5 colors that are there. Canvas is very easy to teach, very easy to play. People play it on whatever level they want. I've had people join a table, sit there and make pretty little pictures, and they're like, oh, look, I scored points too. And then I've had people who completely ignore the pictures, that's me, and then try to go, well, I like the picture, I just don't build it based on the picture. And then they build out towards the most strategic option as far as how to score points. It plays quickly, it's very accessible, very easy to teach, fairly affordable. That's going to be Canvas, my number 1 game on this list. They're not ranked, they're ranked in terms of accessibility. My most accessible all the way to the least accessible. Coming up next, we have Codenames Duet over here. Although specifically, you can go either way on this one. You could do Codenames or Codenames Duet. I think I would lean towards recommending Codenames for a first-time person to this game, but Codenames Duet is going to be a better choice if you're going for cooperative play. Codenames has a ton of games under their umbrella. There's a ton of games under their umbrella. The 2 I recommend the most or vanilla Codenames and Codenames Duet, and for that you need to know your own personal situation. Are you more likely to be playing this with one other person? Then Codenames Duet's going to be a better game for you. It's cooperative as a 2-player game. You could also do it as cooperative teams in general. You could have 4-player Codenames Duet with 2 people on both sides working together all as a team, but if you are playing it more likely at higher player counts, if you're playing it at 4 players or above more often, then I would recommend regular Codenames. And Codenames is the party game on this list. Ironically, I do genuinely think Canvas is more accessible than Codenames, but they're both incredibly accessible. These are the 2 most accessible games on this list, and Codenames is like an $18 game, but the basic premise is you're trying to create codes for your teammates, and again, in a 2-player game, it's 1 team, and in a 4-player game in regular Codenames is multiple teams, or 2 teams per game, grouped up amongst however many players there are. But the idea is I sit there and I look at the cards on the table, and these are the cards, and again, slightly different depending on which way you're playing it, but over here, let's say I see that let's pretend I'm trying to connect, I don't know, Volcano and Gear and Pacific. I have no idea what I'm going to do. Volcano, Gear, and Pacific. Now, the problem is I have to be mindful not to hit the other words at the same time. But if I'm trying to connect Volcano, Gear, and Pacific, there's 25 words on the table, and I'm trying to give you that information, what can I even do? I mean, I could just do Maui, or I don't know, Moana for Volcano and Pacific. I think that would work. Moana 2. I missed Gear, but you can't necessarily get everything. So I say Moana 2, and I hope that you pick Volcano and Pacific. Maybe you'll pick Tutu, I don't know, Earthquake. You might pick Earthquake 2. You can pick any number of different things here, and you have to be mindful as the clue giver that you're not giving clues that are going to result in the players on the table, your teammates effectively picking the wrong words. You're working together to try to give them a word and then a number of words that it relates to so that you can ultimately get your objectives done in Codenames. Fantastic experience. Definitely recommend this one a lot. And anytime I ever do one of these lists, there's a decent chance Codenames will show up. I just think it's that good and that accessible of a game. Then next up over here, we have Welcome to Your Perfect Home. Now, I actually prefer Welcome to the Moon. Welcome to the Moon. Welcome to the Moon is the 3rd iteration of the series. It's my personal favorite in the series. It's the one I'd recommend if you've already played Welcome to, or if you're a little more experienced in the hobby. But if you are diving into the hobby for the first time, I think Welcome to Your Perfect Home is a more accessible experience with a little less going on and just a little easier to jump into it. Now, again, I have expansions galore in this box. I have all the various extra pads. You don't need any of that. The base game of Welcome to is going to give you all that you need, and the basic idea is this is going to be your roll and write entry for the genre over here. You're going to be flipping cards over here, and those cards are going to create a combination of a number and an icon, and that determines what number you place and what ability you get to do depending on the icon you reveal. You're trying to fill out these blocks, but in ascending order. So you can have that 7 here, but that means to the left over here has to be things that are below a 7, and to the right have to be above a 7. The cards range from 1 to 15. You can modify them to 1 to 17 depending on some abilities, and the general idea is you flip cards and then you have 3 possible options, and every player chooses an option and then also where to place that option. So while you have the same exact opportunity and potential throughout the entire game, how players build out will affect how that opportunity and potential develops across the course of the game. Incredibly easy to play, incredibly easy to get into. I do think that if you do like this game, completely skip Welcome to Las Vegas. I think it's not nearly as good. I think Welcome to the Moon is a great option, but there are also expansion packs that basically represent, additional pads that you can have. You just have hey, here's a new pad with some, this is like I think this is the zombie one. You just have various options as far as small rules modifications that give you the same gameplay with some small rules difference and some different objective cards for the game. So the maps are a nice easy way to build it out and add to the game, but you don't need any of them. Welcome to Your Perfect Home will give you tons of gameplay in the box. Coming in at number 4 over here, we have Cascadia. Now, if you know the channel, if you're familiar here, if you've been here before, this box doesn't have a perfect size to show the side of it. The bottom is all, I guess, it's supposed to cover that part. That makes sense. Anyways, over here, Cascadia. If you're not new to the channel, if you know the channel, you could expect to see this on this list in general. Cascadia is one of my favorite gateway games in general. This is a somewhat new game to the list. I think there are 2 games from 2023 on this list, but there are, a bunch of relatively new games. Cascadia is coming out in the past several years, and there's some flat-out games, and it's an incredibly accessible, incredibly rewarding map-building game kind of. Scoring objectives, variable scoring objectives. What you're doing is you're going to be drafting every round a tile that goes into your tableau. You start with the center tile, and then you're adding new tiles as well as new animals to the habitats on your tableau. Basically, it's going to go ahead and look like this over here. So you have the center region where you're trying to draft tiles and animal tokens. You have your own personal tableau, each player's own personal tableau over here, and you're trying to create your own tableau based on the scoring objectives of these 5 animal cards. You see, each of the 5 animal cards tells you how that animal scores. Look at those bears. They want to be scored in little clumps of 3. Look at those fish. They want to create a little pattern that goes up the river, and they score based on the different animals touching it. Each of the 5 animal types has a different way that it scores, and there are different cards, so that the way bears score in one game versus another is different, which keeps the game constantly rewarding, constantly different as you go through it. And every single game, you're going to be drafting 20 tiles and 20 animals to build out the optimal scoring habitat based on the cards, but also based on the way the habitat types touch each other. You'll score for the largest section of each of the 5 types of habitats as well. The game is simple tile placement with just variable scoring. So tile placement, variable scoring, as you grab various things, put them into your own private board. So it's not a ton of player interaction past the fact that you are grabbing from a center tableau of options, but it's just a fun, rewarding experience that also there's 20 or so solo scenarios. I think there's 20 or so solo scenarios you can go through here that will give you very fun, very rewarding solo play as well, that you can play again. It's challenging solo play. It'll give you more than 20 plays, I guarantee you that, if you're trying to beat every single one. Plus, of course, the competitive scoring in general, the competitive play in general. Cascadia is reasonably priced, very easy to play, very easy to teach, and a great game to start any board game collection. Very similarly, and in a similar weight class, we have Trailblazers, which is one of my 2023 titles on this list. I'm realizing this video is going to be in 2024, but Trailblazers is going to be one of my 2023 titles left on this list. There's 2 here that are, again, like I said, newer, and the rest are all slightly older. But Trailblazers is going to have a very similar aspect to Cascadia. You're basically trying to create your own little network, although very different as far as how it goes. We'll explain that second. But then additionally to the competitive play, that's like a 15-minute game, 4 rounds of play, drafting 6 cards out of 8 every single round, building out your perfect camping site with trails, and hence the name Trailblazers. But there's also strong solo play that will give you like 50 or so scenarios to go through. I think there's 50 scenarios to go through. Is it 50? There's 6, and then 36 is 42, I guess, 45 maybe. But then there's also the epic solo mode and the expansion solo mode. There's a lot of solo play in this box, so you can play this game solo to be able to enjoy the puzzle, to be able to get better at the game, to see how to build out the optimal trails, or you can play it competitively, and they are both very challenging and very rewarding in their own right. But in Trailblazers, what you're doing is building out trails. You have these whole trails over here, and you're drafting these cards that are these little cards over here, that are these, like, 1x2 cards effectively, that will go down into your trails, connecting and creating these paths. And with each of your 3 campsites, you're going to be placing a new one every round for the first 3 rounds, and the 4th round's kind of a cleanup round. But in those, I'm realizing this is upside down over here, but you can still see it over there. Anyways, you're going to be placing these trails down over here on the board. You can overlay cards when you want, but ultimately the brown campsite, where it gets points for the brown trails that start and end at that campsite, which means you're trying to create these pathways as you place down these cards. But there are also variable scoring goals as well that will give you an additional challenge to be mindful, and an additional way to score more points in the game. The solo play will build off that, forcing you to, the basic solo mode is going to be get 30, 40, or 50 points, and then once you get those done, which 30, 40, and 50 points, reasonably, the 50 points is challenging, but you can do it. At that point, you start to go to the advanced solo modes, where you have to get specific goals while getting those points, and that's where the game escalates rapidly in difficulty, giving you a ton of challenge to this. This is a game that if you're trying to complete all the solo games, you have easily 100 plus plays under your belt over here. It is a challenging game, but it's also very rewarding, and like I said, it plays in like 15 minutes per session. It is so easy to knock out a bunch of games in Trailblazers, and it is a fun time doing so. This game is not a chore, it is an absolute treat to play through, and it's very easy to teach, to play, and also somewhat reasonably priced. I would say this is actually a little more expensive than I would ideally like for it is. Like Cascadia is like a $30 game. I think Trailblazers is a $40 game, I think, which is totally worth it for the gameplay I get out of it, but I do wish it were in that Cascadia price range, but still a great game that I'm going to recommend. My number 5 over here, that's 5, my number 6 over here is going to move up a drop in terms of the complexity while still being very accessible and incredibly easy on the eyes, pleasing to look at, and one that people I find do want to play as soon as they see it, and that is Art Society. Art Society is again going to be a point-scoring optimization game. Trailblazers is a little more specific in the points. I think Cascadia is more about that point-scoring optimization. Art Society is going to give you that same aspect, but now we introduce bidding as a mechanic as well. So we've seen party games, we've seen roll and write, we've seen some, overlaying cards with point scoring, we've seen some tile building, we've seen some drafting in Trailblazers over here. I think that's the only drafting we have in this pile over here. But in Art Society, we have bidding and auctioning as a mechanic as well, with that variable point scoring you've already seen in Cascadia and some others, but primarily Cascadia. In Art Society, you are bidding every round over specific tiles that will go into your personal painting. You're going to have your personal painting board over here. You have individual tiles that you're bidding on every single round using your cards over here. You have a limited number of cards. You have 20 cards over here, each with values 1 through 20, and you're only going to be able to, you're going to probably be using maybe 15 of those cards in a game, to try to gather those tiles. So you have to think about when do you want to cash in your 20 versus when do you want to go ahead and use that 2 because you don't really care which tile you get from the options out there. You will have to make those decisions. You can't always win. You have to think about when do you want to win the most. I guess strictly speaking, it is possible for you to always win, but it's very, very, very unlikely for that to happen. But in the game, you're trying to place these tiles down into your grid. And again, you have a bunch of things to consider. Which tiles can go next to each other without eliminating scoring, because some colors next to each other will stop those colors from scoring in the game. You're also going to be trying to figure out how to optimize around those individual shields and little things that fill in the gaps, as well as which painting types are most popular, which defines the scoring aspect. There's a bit of a shared scoring element where the colors of the paintings, the types of artwork that it is, will be affected by the game, by what's left in the game, which is going to affect the value of the art pieces you have. And so you're trying to place these out, trying to be mindful of so many different rules, trying to get the little scoring bonuses, trying to get the perfect eyesight bonus, because effectively the paintings that are at the perfect eye line, the where the human eye looks as opposed to too low or too high, get an additional bonus factor as you're trying to go through this. It is incredibly pleasing, it's incredibly easy to play, incredibly accessible, and it's just one of those games that just lining up a giant wall full of art, there's something satisfying and engaging about that. Art Society, that's my other 2023 title on this list, and it's incredibly, it's just a good gateway game. It's a good gateway game. Highly recommend this one. It'll be fun for you, and it will be like just an easy one to like teach other players and get them up and running on. Which brings us to my number 7 over here. Number 7 is arguably, it's one of my highest rated games on this list, number 7. Actually, Codenames is pretty high, Cascadia is pretty high, Trailblazers, a lot of these games are pretty highly rated for me, which I guess is good for a recommended list. But either way, number 7 over here is going to be the Quest for Dorado. Now, if you do go hunting for this game, there are 2 versions as far as the art goes. This is the newer version, this is an older version. They're both fantastic games. I do recommend this one if you're able to get your hands in it. I think the cards are a little bigger and the art's a little better in my opinion, but both are fantastic, and I fell in love with the first edition just fine, so you'll be covered no matter what. But in Quest for Dorado, designed by Referral Knizia, what you're doing is you're racing. This is a deck building game, which I think is the first deck building we have over here, but it's deck building combined with racing. You're going to have a map on the board, and you can either use one of the preset maps or you can create your own, but the maps are made up of these large tiles over here, and then you're going to have a pool of cards that you're buying from, as well as a starting hand of cards. And as you play cards, you can use those cards to traverse through certain terrain types. Play a bunch of green cards, you can go through the jungle. Play a bunch of water cards, you can go through the water over here, or the gold can be used to go through the villages, or to buy more cards, which will improve your deck. You're trying to buy those cards because you're trying to race to the very end, and at first your starting cards are fine, but they're not the same thing. Playing a bunch of green cards to be able to move 3 versus having that one card that will just machete through the jungle and you're able to move forward with a single card, those aren't equitable. So trying to get your hands on that card is important, but you have to think through the economy of the game. Where is the game at? Where are you at in the game? What does the map look like? What are the best cards to buy? Which cards are available in the market right now? Those are all decisions that will be in play as you try to think through what is the most efficient way to get from point A to point B between your starting deck and between what you can iterate upon as you play. This is a very, very rewarding game. It gives you that deck building aspect. I think it's the only, no, there's 2 deck building games we're going to have today. We have a little bit of deck building in the Quest for Dorado. We have that racing mechanic. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It plays in like 30 to 45 minutes. It's very easy to teach, very variable to play, a lot of great things going on, and again, reasonably priced too. The Quest for Dorado is a fantastic game for any new collection. If you watch my my best games to buy with $100, I'm pretty sure Quest for Dorado is the most expensive game in that video, and it's still worth every single cent. Coming in at number 8. Number 8 is going to be Quacks of Quedlinburg, which is arguably my lowest. I think Quacks of Quedlinburg is my lowest rated game for me personally on this list. But I am trying to think through not just my own personal taste, but also the games that might work better for you or not. And Quacks of Quedlinburg, no one can deny just how incredibly popular this game has become since it's come out. This game gives you push your luck and bag building. So there's a degree of deck building-ish going on. Bag building and deck building are mechanics in the same family, building upon that same concept that you're going to build your own pool and then randomize what you get from that pool. But in Quacks of Quedlinburg, there's also the additional aspect of push your luck, where you can keep drawing from the bag every single turn, but at a certain point you might bust. Your bag might go boom, and then instead of getting points and your money for the round, you're going to get your points or your money, which totally changes the way you play the game, because you need points to win, but you need money to continuously build your bag and improve it for future rounds. Every single round, what you're doing is you're gathering gathering various tokens that are going to go into your pots over here. So you have the players' individual pots, you're gathering tokens from your bags from these pool of tokens you'll be buying, all of which have different abilities. So again, it has that large degree of deck building, bag building. It has tons of abilities that are going to change every game. So for example, what the black tokens do in one game is very different than what the black tokens do in a different game, depending on the abilities you have in play, which keeps the game very variable. Again, Cascadia, where you have the same element in the game being utilized in different ways game to game, keeping the game fresh as you approach it every single time. And the game has that satisfying pull a token from the bag, pull a token from the bag, continuously trying to get that token, and then trying to see if you can just fill up your pot a drop more to get the bonuses, the extra rubies, the first player marker, all the various things you're going to be able to try to get while you try to fill up the pot, while trying not to bust and while trying to get the points and the money to build your bag for another round. I have my personal complaints to this game as to why it's not one of my favorite games, but it's still a game that stands in my collection, and at the end of the day, it has been incredibly popular. If you do want my personal preference over Quacks of Quedlinburg, that's going to be Rolling Heights or Cubitos. I think both of them to me are slightly better, but if I'm trying to build a list around what is the best way to start your collection, I think I would drift towards Quacks of Quedlinburg just based on the popularity of the game alone. Moving in at number 9. Number 9, we have our first co-op title over here. I guess, unless you count Codenames Duet, but again, I probably recommend regular Codenames if you are coming new to this. But my first co-op game on the list is going to be The Loop over here from Pandasaurus Games. The Loop is absolutely delightful, and there are a lot of good games that you could replace for this spot if you're looking for something else. I do think The Loop, though, at its place on this list, it is a bit more complicated, it's a bit more going on, but it's incredibly rewarding. If you do want some alternate options, I would recommend looking into Pandemic. Pandemic is a fantastic cooperative game that will give you the cooperative experience. They'll give you a slightly simpler game to dive into, but if you want something that's, you know, as we trend upwards to this list towards a bit more complexity, I think The Loop to me is absolutely amazing. And again, base game will be plenty of content, but you could add more content as well if you start feeling the need for it. But in The Loop, you're going to have this center map over here. You're going to have a puzzle of trying to figure out how you can accomplish the missions you need to accomplish to win the game, but these scenarios give you different challenges as far as what's happening. You see, you're going to be dropping cubes into that tower over here. Every round you're dropping cubes into the tower, which will slowly but surely trigger kind of explosions on the board, just destroying each area on the board, making them harder to traverse through, and also eliminating the mission if you haven't accomplished them. It's your job to utilize the energy in the game and to utilize your cards. There's a degree of deck building going on here, not stronger deck building like you'll find in, you know, Quest of Dorado or our number 10 pick over here, but there is a degree of deck building in the experience as you go through it, as you gather various cards that will help your engine, as you try to utilize energy to perform a loop, which is where you can reuse your cards based on spending energy, but it gets more and more expensive every single turn. So your first loop costs 1 energy, then 2 energy, then 3 energy, making it not sustainable to have incredibly powerful turns, but making those situational strong turns incredibly rewarding and fun to go through. I think The Loop is a fantastic cooperative game that rewards a lot of optimal play. It is challenging. This is not a game that's always easy to win. There's the most basic scenario you can go through, but then there are additional scenarios that escalate in complexity and difficulty. So it's a game you can play at a variety of levels as you enjoy this game, this hobby of board games. You can dive into it for the first time and it'll be a bit intimidating, or you can continuously level up and grow with the game and add complexity and difficulty and challenges to the experience as you continue to try to figure out the most powerful way to master The Loop. Highly recommend this one from Pandasaurus Games, an excellent cooperative experience. And then my number 10 is the only game I debated whether it's a bit too complicated for a top 10 games to start a collection list, but there's a reason I have this in here, and that's going to be Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium, and again, worth noting, there is a new Dune Imperium game out that recently came out, Dune Imperium Uprising. You can get that one, or you can get this one, especially if you're trying to get games used to save money. You'll be able to find Dune Imperium at a more reasonable price point, especially because Uprising just came out, so a lot of people will be trying to upgrade their sets and may only want one of the two. So either one worth looking into. I have not played Uprising yet, but from what I hear, it is a fantastic game as well. But Dune Imperium is slightly heavier than the rest of the games on this list, and it also introduces conflict. I do think conflict is an important thing to have, not necessarily important, but a good thing to have in any board game collection, and so I wanted to have at least one conflict-based game on this list, but I do find a lot of general game design, especially modern game design, one of the things that makes it so friendly and accessible is the lack of direct conflict. Like, sure, you're trying to win in these games, but you're not directly competing to the detriment of other players. In Quest of Dorado, you're racing to the finish line, but no one else is really strongly negative negatively affected. In Art Society, you're trying to get the best paintings and score the most points, but there isn't a direct head-to-head conflict in the game. Dune Imperium will give you that while still being lighter. This is not a game where you're building out a large area, having people walk in, destroy your forces, rip you apart. That won't happen here. It is conflict light though, because there still is battle every single round as you vie to be the first person to 10 victory points. The reason this is here, like I said already, I want that conflict, and you can't deny the general popularity of the game and how good of an experience this is. This will give you worker placement, it'll give you deck building, it'll give you that extra bit of conflict, so it nicely rounds out our list, being the most complicated while still being accessible. In the game, you're playing to 10 points, that's just a general idea, and there are a bunch of ways to get points, but one of the more common ways is every round there's going to be a conflict at the end of the round, and whoever wins that conflict will get things, usually including points. Especially in later rounds, you might even get 2 points for winning a conflict, plus of course the variable other ways to get points. All adds up to you trying to get to 10 points. Meanwhile, you have a starter deck of cards, and you have 2 agents you're placing on the board using a deck of cards to augment where they go, and the cards left in your hand will give you the end of round bonuses. But then every single round you're also building out your deck. You're gathering better cards that will give you better placement bonuses and better end of round bonuses. You're weeding through your deck slowly but surely to get rid of cards. You're constantly trying to find ways to optimize within the system across those rounds of play. In theory, 10 rounds of play. In practice, usually someone will trigger endgame before you get to the final 10th round of play. The combination of getting points every round plus having extra ways to get points within the game usually means you'll have a bunch of ways to get points, and maybe in round 7 or 8, maybe 9, you'll be triggering endgame as you go through this while trying to build out the best deck, while trying to figure out how to take the right spots on the board. Let's go ahead and show you the picture of the board over here. You're going to have all these cards over here that you're trying to build out, your starter cards, the cards you're adding. You'll have a unique role that you can utilize, which gives you a special ability. You'll have the board over here, which gives you all these various zones to get spice, to get money, to go ahead and get influence within the factions and abilities from those factions. You're going to have your units in the conflict that you're constantly trying to add them to the pool over here so you can go ahead and win the conflict with the most strength. You're trying to be mindful of your money, your spice, your water, all the various currencies of the game. I do think Rise of Ix, which is an expansion for this game, will take this game to the next level. So if you do like this game and want more from it, Rise of Ix is absolutely fantastic. The problem is it's going to add $40 to your already $363.93. So I want to be very clear. I think Dune Imperium is a fantastic game without Rise of Ix, but it will only get better with Rise of Ix. There's additional expansions too. I don't think they're as essential. I think Rise of Ix is where it's at. And this is what I have over here. $363.93 worth of board games, assuming you buy them new from Miniature Market. You can also go buy them used. eBay often has used titles. Board Game Revolution Buy and Sell Group has good titles. There are very often ways to get cheaper games. You do not always have to get things new. There are plenty of ways to get budget options, or just wait till on sale. Put these on your wish list somewhere, and then as they pop up on sale, you can get them that way as well. But if you're looking for 10 fantastic games to start a collection with that will have a high degree of accessibility, a variety of mechanics, and a good way to grow within the hobby and get a sense of the different things out there while having 10 fantastic games, well, this is my recommended list. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.